Okay, we'll just restart that because everybody wasn't in position there. Good afternoon, everybody. Can I give a warm welcome to this Falkirk Council Planning Review Committee, been held in Grangemouth Community Education Unit, 69 to 71 Abbots Road, Grangemouth, today, Tuesday the 19th of November. My name's Bailey Buchanan. I'm Falkirk Council's planning convener. In accordance with Section 43 of the Local Government in Scotland Act 2003, it has been directed that this meeting will be conducted in such a manner as to allow remote attendance by elected members. So at this stage, I'm going to go around the members that are here, and we also have one member of the committee that's online.
I'm Councillor Ralph Kelly, Vice Convener of Planning.
Hello, I'm Gordon Forrest. I'm Councillor for Lower Braes.
Councillor Flynn.
Councillor Jim Flynn here from Ward 4, Carskenneth and Trice. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll go to the officers that are present.
Vice Convener Douglas Blythe, Legal Advisor to the committee.
Julie Seidel-Gregory, Planning Advisor to the committee.
Jim Miller, Committee Services Team Leader.
Carly Tolan, Democratic Services Graduate.
Okay, thank you for that. The meeting will also be live streamed. There's no apologies directed, but maybe just ask as we're waiting on one of our officers coming, has he appeared yet? Do you know? He has appeared. Okay, would you like to come?
We do have apologies from Councillor Nimmo.
Right. Yeah, just sit there and we get a microphone. I want him up so he can introduce himself.
It's just he's not one of the officers.
Okay, fine. Okay, and just to let you know, I'm going to a legal officer in relation to apologies, item 1 on the agenda.
There's apologies from Councillor Nimmo, Convener.
Thank you very much. That takes us to item 2 on your agenda today, declaration of interest. And just for clarity, I'll read this out. Find the relevant agenda item and the nature of the interest. Have we any declarations of interest at this time? No, none intimated. That's fine. Thank you. I'll now take you to item 3, which is the Planning Review Committee procedures, and I'll pass you over to Douglas Blythe, the team leader for legal services, and it's on pages 2 to 6 on your agenda. Thank you, Mr. Blythe.
Thank you, Convener. This is a meeting of the Planning Review Committee, and as such is convened to review an officer's decision on planning matters. This matter has called before the committee before. Back in September. At that time, the committee assessed whether it had sufficient information to make a decision and decided that it didn't and invoked 2 items of further procedure. Now, there are 3 methods of further procedure available to the committee, namely written representations, site visits or a hearing. And in September, the committee decided that they would like to carry out site visit, which happened this morning, and also to have a hearing on specified matters. And those matters were, number 1, the impact of the proposed development in relation to operational viability. Number 2, legal requirements around farm animal welfare. And 3, existing and proposed operation in the context of the overall business. Now, just to remind members that those are the hearing matters which we'll be dealing with shortly, and those are the only matters that will be the subject of the hearing. So, you know, any other issues would not be appropriate to deal with in the context of the hearing. We'll be going into the hearing session shortly, Convener, and after that, the committee would then have to reassess whether it had sufficient information to make a decision. And as with any decision on planning matters, it has to be decided in accordance with the development plan, unless there are material considerations to dictate otherwise. And as always, members are should weigh up the applicable policies and balance those in the context of the application and before arriving at their decision. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Mr. Blythe. That takes us to item 4, which is the erection of agricultural workers' dwelling house at land to the northeast of Ivy Cottage, Lathallen House, Madison. It's pages 7 to 30 in your agenda papers, and I'm going to ask Julie Seidel-Gregory, our planning advisor, just to give us a brief overview on this application. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Convener. This application was last heard on the 18th of September, where I provided an overview of the proposal, which included reference to the development plan and material planning considerations. I do not intend to repeat that overview in full today, other than to comment that this application relates to the construction of a single-storey detached house within grazing fields to the north of Lathallen House. The house would sit adjacent to an agricultural building, which was the subject of a recent prior notification and has not yet been constructed on site. The applicant seeks to justify the proposed development on the basis of being required for an agricultural worker. The local review committee decided to visit Drumhaven Farm. The site visit was carried out this morning, where both the agricultural haulage site at Balderston Road and the grazing fields at Lathallen House were viewed. It was also decided that a hearing session would be held in relation to the impact of the proposed development in relation to operational viability, legal requirements in relation to animal welfare, and the existing and proposed operations of the site in relation to the context of the overall business. The response from the Planning Authority and the applicant's agents are before you, as mentioned by others in your supplementary papers, page 7 to 30. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you very much, Julie. Now it's an opportunity for the applicant or the applicant's agent or both to step forward to the seats and then give us their summary. Thank you. You've got 10 minutes. You've been here before, so you know the system. Once you're ready, you'll have 10 minutes from. Aye. Oh, yeah. Well, obviously the usual format. You introduce yourself, who you are, who you represent. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Ewan Pearson here, Chartered Surveyor. Specialise in development and related to rural activities. So, as has been pointed out, we are only here for this hearing to talk about 3 specific issues. We're not here to talk about compliance with the development plan or what colour my car is or anything like that. We're only here to talk about the 3 matters that were specified. I produced a hearing statement. I can read the hearing statement if people wish. The Planning Authority's consultant has produced a memorandum which does actually stray off the topics that we're talking about, but I'm happy to go through that. I'm happy to answer questions. If I just take the relevant specified matters in turn. So if we talk about the operations, you saw this morning, well, I hope you saw this morning, the existence of a farm with lots of animals that are being bred, and pigs and cows, and I hope that there's no doubt in your mind that there is a farm at Balderston Road. You will also have seen a complex of offices, which I said to you was occupied by Mr. Stewart's 3 businesses, and you saw a number of haulage trucks that were parked up in a haulage area. Obviously, to my knowledge, the planning officer never visited Balderston Road, and in fact, WSP never visited Balderston Road. WSP never interviewed Mr. Stewart, never asked him any questions about his operations. I don't know what the basis of their memorandum is on, other than perhaps a review of paperwork. So the operations at Balderston are a farm, a haulage business, and offices. There are 3 separate independent businesses that Mr. Stewart's involved in, and you've been given the financial figures for that. Sorry, I'm not keeping the time. Can someone tell me when I get to 5 minutes? If you can tell me when I get to 5 minutes. You've been given financial figures, 2 sets of financial figures, the original ones with the application and the most recent ones from the accountants that do the returns to HMRC. These are profitable independent businesses. They do not rely on each other. And what we're talking about here is the farm business. The applicant is the farm business, George Stewart and Son. So they are the ones that rear the pigs, look after the cattle at Balderston, and now they've acquired some fields at Lathallen, which you saw today are populated with sheep and cattle. And I think you actually met one of the employees who was feeding the cattle. So those fields were acquired as an expansion of that farm operation. Nothing to do with the haulage business, nothing to do with the company that provides the haulage business with the lorries. So they may share the same office complex, but that's the extent of the continuity or Venn diagram that exists between them all. So in terms of the viability, the applicant's farm business is up and running and has been running for over 100 years. They've acquired these extra fields, they've populated them with sheep and cattle. The business is profitable. Those sheep and cattle have been there for a number of years now, and the business is profitable. Whether or not there is a house there or not doesn't make any difference to the profitability of the business. In terms of operations, the house is required so that the farm business can meet its animal welfare obligations. So there's a number of criticisms here from WSP. Again, they've never visited Balderston Road, they've never spoken. They have never spoken to anybody about how the operations are run in terms of welfare. So if I could maybe just elaborate on that for you. So when you had your site visit today, you saw 15 sheds with animals. So those animals are always indoors. So in terms of animal welfare, there are staff available on site when those offices are open, which is basically 6 in the morning till 10, 11 o'clock at night. So those animals are therefore being looked after by someone who is on that site at Balderston Road. Then they have to put sorry, how much time is that?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. They have to put, they have to give appropriate supervision to these animals. But because they're indoors between the hours of darkness and they're in a gated farm environment, you came in the gates today and you saw that there was a gate. They are secure and they do not have to be supervised every hour or every 3 hours or every 2 hours because they are inside and they are in a secure facility. That is not the same situation when you have animals in a field where there is no supervision. And obviously at Lathallen, those cattle and sheep are susceptible to worrying from other animals, the proximity to the built environment. You've got the right to roam, people walking across the fields. There's difficulties in that area with people on motorbikes. And therefore, those animals need rigorous, repetitive supervision and inspection. I've set out for you in the hearing the legislative framework which dictates what the farm has to do for those animals. So at the moment, as we explained to the planning officer, at the moment, Mr. Stewart, who lives on the east side of Linlithgow with his wife, who's also from a farming background, they are responsible for the welfare, but they can't go 24 hours a day. So they're relying on the farming community and their children to make sure that these animals are inspected because there's nobody there. So Mr. Stewart can't work 24 hours a day. The best solution is for him to live on site where he can have natural supervision of these animals. And the house, as you probably have worked out from your visit today, is smack in the middle of the fields. So there's 360 visual, natural supervision of all the animals. Trying to think of other things to impart to you. There is some commentary in the memo. How many minutes is that? Sorry. There's some commentary in the memo about a haulage business. There seems to be some suggestion that the farm that the Stewarts had was abandoned in favour of a haulage business. It is true that the original farm was Drum Farm over at Bowness, and that the farming operations moved to Balderston Road.
Final minute, sir.
Final minute?
Yeah.
Right, okay, sorry. So I guess what I'm trying to say to you is, right, the justification for this house is nothing to do with the haulage business. The farm is an independent financial operation. You've got figures that show that. The farm exists. You saw the animals, you saw the buildings. This is an addition to the holding. These animals need to be supervised 24 hours a day. They're not inside all the time. And therefore, the best way to deal with it for legislation is to have the farmer living beside the animals. And that is what we're asking for, permission for a farmer's house amongst the animals.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. There will be an opportunity now for members to ask you some questions. I'm going to come in right away in relation to questions and your hearing statement. And you gave us, obviously, it was very beneficial for us to go out there and have a look at this situation. The submission in relation to the from the council in terms of the last meeting required the submission of a hearing statement covering 3 specified matters. So I'm just going to go through them again. Sorry if you were repetitive, but it's important because these are the areas that we're going to base our decision on. The first one is the impact of the proposed development in relation to the operational viability. So what is the impact of this proposed development in relation to the operation viability?
Well, what I was trying to say to you was that the operation, as I see it, is the farm, is George Stewart and Son. That is their farming operation. And their farming operation is split over 2 locations.
Right.
Balderston Road and the fields. So they're already operating. There's no having a house here doesn't affect the viability of the business. It makes it easier for the business because the farmer is living amongst the animals. I don't think you can actually put a financial
No,
figure
we're not
to it.
talking about financial. We're talking about the general impact, and I think you answered that one. Now, the fact is, as I said to you initially, the questions that might be coming from members is just to show that we have got an issue that we've got to ensure that we ask the questions in relation to the submissions that were requested from yourself. So that's the first one, the impact, right? That you've covered that. Let's go now to the legal requirements around farm animal welfare. Right, would you just like to expand on that again?
Okay, so I'm just going to talk about the fields. Right? I'm
Right.
not going to talk about what you saw this morning with the sheds, because I've covered that. So the justification for the house is the welfare of the animals that are in those fields, right? Of which we've given you the flock size and the herd size. So the law requires those animals to be regularly inspected by competent staff, which would be the farmer, Mr. Stewart, to ensure that they're fed, they're given appropriate medical treatment, they're given protection from predators or the weather, and they're given space to move. So he is responsible for ensuring those animals have that.
Right. That's a legal requirement. That's fine. You already stated that initially, but as I say, I'm concentrating on the 3 areas that we've requested. The last one is...
Sorry, can I just...
Yep.
Those are the legal requirements, but the fundamental problem farmers face is the regular inspection.
Right.
I think WSP alluded to the fact that you could live anywhere and then just drive down and inspect the animals. Well, you can, but that isn't regular, and that's not relative to their circumstances or their health or their medical condition.
Okay, that's fine. We'll go to the third one is existing and proposed operation of site in the context of the overall business. Existing and proposed operation of site in the context of the overall business.
So the overall business is George Stewart and Son, which is the 2 physical elements, the sheds and the fields. That is the business. That is the farming business. It's not the haulage business. It's not the company that supplies the haulage business with trucks. That's nothing to do with the farming business. It's nothing to do with George Stewart and Son. So we've given you figures to show that the farm is economically viable, and it will continue to be so on this model. And the labour calculation was given to the planning officer at the very beginning, showed that 350 sheep up to 35 head of beef cattle required 1.4 units of labour. So that's a justification for one person living on the site.
Right. Okay. Thanks for that. Sorry if I'm trying to help the situation by ensuring that members of this committee are aware the areas that we've got to debate and question you on. It might be that other members are maybe still unsure about the same situation and they'll come back to you, but that's your right, and your position obviously as agent is just to sit there, and whether you're going to be repetitive or not, well, you don't mind. That's fine. Okay, then I'm going to open it up to other members. Any other member come in at this stage? Councillor Forrest.
I've got a few things here. Twice you have actually said that the impact of the viability, the housing won't have any effect at all, whether it's there or not. You know, so there is no impact on it.
Sorry, I
legal
was talking about financial viability
Aye.
there. Not.
If you had said financial,
I did.
then I would have taken that.
I did.
Later on you did, but fine. The legal requirement for animal welfare is regularly inspected by a competent staff, but no one's on site at the moment.
Excuse me,
Sorry,
would you take your seat, please? This is a formal meeting. Would you please take your seat? Could you please take your seat? Well, I would be quite happy if you didn't say any more. If you wouldn't say any more. You're aware of the situation here. We're live stream here. This is a professional meeting. Thank you very much. Okay, carry on.
Sorry, Councillor, could you repeat that for me?
Yeah, sorry.
You're talking about someone.
The legal requirements we found out are on animal welfare that the animals are regularly inspected by competent staff. Right. At the moment, they aren't, because
Yes, they are.
They are there, so they're regularly inspected. So where does that member of staff stay?
What I said at the beginning, which are written to the officer, was that at the moment they're just managing to meet their legal requirements because they're driving from their house, right? Mr. Stewart's driving from his house.
Right.
He's relying on his wife, who you've just heard from, unfortunately. They're relying from assistance from her. They're relying from their children to fill the gap, to make sure that the supervision is in place.
Right. Okay. So
but the best thing is if he's right there in the middle, and then he doesn't need to do that.
So I take it that you would then employ someone to be there, and the house would be part of the employment.
No, the farmer, Mr. Stewart, will live in the house.
Oh, Mr. Stewart will?
Yeah, the house is for him.
Right,
Because he's the responsible person.
Okay.
He's the one that'll get prosecuted by the payments agency if the animals are hurt or.
Right. The next thing was the cattle, for the most part, other than the belted Galloways that we saw this morning, they're housed indoors, except for during the summer. So therefore, the numbers of the animals that are being cared for in the fields has declined to less than, sorry, how many was it? 350 sheep and 60 odd cattle. So they're not there all the time. That is only a summer.
It's 35 cattle.
35 cattle.
And you wouldn't have seen 35 there today because, as you point out, it's -1 outside, and not all cattle breeds can survive, so they get wintered inside. But for the majority of the year, they're on the fields. And remember that the planning authorities already approved a prior notification for a shed that's to go next to the house. So the farmer would then move the vulnerable cattle into the shed.
Yeah, we found that out this morning. Thank you. And I don't know much about sheep, and I'm very, very grateful, and I got a lot out of that visit this morning, but I can count. There weren't 350 sheep on those fields this morning. I'd say it was nearer 100, if that. I might be totally wrong. They might well have been round the corner or something, but that didn't look like 350 sheep, and therefore the requirement that you need. Can you tell me about that?
It's not a case of the requirement we need. We're working back. We're calculating the labour requirement by working back from what we have, and the flock has the registered flock is 350, and there's 35 cattle in that herd. So we're working. So what we're saying is that needs 1.4, if the numbers of the sheep drop, then the labour requirement drops.
Exactly.
So it would drop to 1 maybe at a particular point in time. But you know, they're animals that are they're produced for food. So what you see one day might not be the same next week. And lambing produces even more.
I'm aware of that. Yeah.
As you know, there'll be a lot more at lambing time.
I'm aware of that, but the application is for an agricultural worker's cottage, and the agricultural worker has got a minimum number of cattle and sheep that he must tend to qualify for that term. And that term was not met this morning when I visited.
Well, I don't agree with that, Councillor Forrest, because you know we've done a detailed labour requirement for the planning officer, and it sets out the number of man hours per animal depending on what it is. And what we're saying is that, you know, there's a labour requirement of 1.4. So if the sheep was reduced to 200, it would still be sufficient for one person to.
And it still wasn't 200 that I saw this morning. That's what I'm saying. So
well, all I can tell you is that rural payments requires the farmer to tell them what flock or what herd is in a particular location. So that is the number of animals that rural payments have on that farm. And you didn't see any sheep at Baldeston Road, so there are no sheep there.
No, that's exactly what I said.
And as I say, the numbers can go up and down depending on what's happening.
I was asking you to explain how the difference was between the
numbers.
That
may well be the difference. They may have sold some of them, they might have been slaughtered, they may be waiting for more to come. Mm-hmm. But it's the flock that is the driver for the labour calculation.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any Councillor Flynn or Councillor Kelly? You want to come in at this stage?
Yep, if you don't mind, Convener, is that okay with
Councillor Flynn?
Kelly?
Yes, sir.
Yep, thank you. Thank you, Convener. The questions I'm going to ask have been touched on already, but I just want to clarify, just for crystallisation of my mind. First of all, I did find a lot of value from the site meeting this morning. It was very useful to see the animals and the husbandry that was being involved and the amount of work that was even involved. My first question really is this, although it's been touched on, Mr. Stewart and his wife currently live how far away from the new fields? Do you know that, please? You know, which direction are they and roughly how far away are they currently?
Again, this information was given to the planning officer. We explained that they live at King's Cavill, which is on the east side of Linlithgow. So it's probably 20-minute drive without any roadworks in High Street or 20 minutes.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just want to get, as I said earlier on, this is just to crystallise in my own mind and fill in the gaps in my own mind. No, that's fine, 20 minutes, so it's a reasonable distance away. And we did touch on, or you did touch on, and Councillor Forrest touched on, and the meeting this morning, that there are a number of cattle kept inside during the winter because they've got thinner coats or thinner skins and they're not able to sustain in the winter. Could you just reconfirm what the total number of those cattle would be, please? Because I thought it was more than was hinted at earlier. It's just to get a picture of it.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know how many are wintered today indoors.
No, it's not the total number. There's some that, sorry, it was stated today at the visit that in the winter, a lot of the cattle have to stay in, but in the summer they go to the fields. And I'm guessing that they will go to the new fields. So I just wonder what the number of cattle would be when that happens next summer or next spring.
So the registered herd is 35 beasts. That's what they've got, 35. You didn't see 35 on the fields today.
No, we saw the belted Galloways, that's right.
Because some of them have been put in the sheds elsewhere. But it's only for a small period of time that they're in the sheds and taken off the field. And as I've already said, if you allow the farmhouse, then the prior notification share will go up, and then they'll always remain in those fields because they'll just go in and out of the shed.
No, I do understand that quite clearly. Actually, I'm not in any doubt about that. You know, it was just really, I'm trying to work with you is probably a statement, but just try to understand, that if there's 35 cattle currently inside, and then next spring 35 cattle go out to those fields, well, that's fine. But I'm just wanting to clarify: is that the total number, or I didn't count the cattle going around this morning, but there seemed to be quite a number in the sheds. But then, whether it's 35 or more, I don't know. So I just want to get a fix on the number, and I can understand that. If a shed goes up at the Lathallen fields, yeah, that would be far better, because obviously you've got to transport the cattle from the current Balderson site to the fields. Otherwise, no, that's fine.
So can I just clarify?
Yep.
Right. The herd is 35 that is registered to go on these fields. 35 beasts. You saw lots of cattle this morning, but that's not necessarily the cattle that goes on the field. There are other cattle in the sheds at Balderston.
Right. Okay. That's what I'm just trying to clarify in my own mind. That's what I'm just trying to relate the number I saw and the number that were going to the fields. Yeah, that's all right. Thanks.
You maybe saw half of them in the fields today.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you. Final question. Yeah, just sorry. Final question. It's just for clarity again, operational viability, page 20, it mentions that the income in the 15 months was £106,000. Now, is that income or is that profit? Because there's there's a big difference between the two. So I just want to clarify whether that is actual profit.
So the letter from the accountant explains that that's an EBITDA figure, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization.
Okay. It doesn't sound a lot in my mind, but then it's not my business. So, no, thanks for that. Thank you. Thanks, convener.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Any other questions directed at the agent just now? Councillor Kelly.
Can I just clarify my own mind here? You're talking about cattle here, cattle there and that. The fields at Lathallen, if there's a building there, there'll be 35 cattle there. Yeah? Is it including the belted Galloways?
Yeah, that's what's registered with rural payments.
That's the size of it.
35 cattle.
In the sheds at the moment, there are other cattle which are being fattened or what?
No, they're just getting. Some of them are just getting wintered on behalf of other people, other farmers.
Right. That's
for example, W.M. Hendry and Sons.
Yeah, don't have to tell me who.
They provide.
You've clarified the question. Yeah. Thanks. That's fantastic. Thanks a lot.
Okay then, sir. It's an opportunity for you to retake your seat, and we're going to call on. Once you've taken your seat, we're going to call on Patrick Thompson, who's the rural consultant for Falkirk Council. So if you retake your seat, sir. Thank you. Mr. Thompson, just like to take your seat and switch your microphone on and then introduce yourself and what your designation is to the committee. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here as acting on behalf of Falkirk Council as an agricultural consultant working for WSP. I was born and brought up on a mixed farm and attended agricultural college and studied agriculture farm management, and then worked in the agricultural sector for 8 years before returning to college to study rural land management. And I then qualified as a rural practice chartered surveyor, and I've been practicing as a rural practice chartered surveyor in the rural industry since about 93, so 35 years. I've been in the land management business for a number of years and now work with, latterly with WSP, having worked on estates and forestry and farming businesses. Among other things, working for WSP, I've been part of a team undertaking farm impact assessments, farm appraisals, planning accommodation works and valuation on various schemes throughout the UK. We were asked to look at the planning application and the information. We assessed the information that was provided, and we were only able to assess the information that was provided by the council as part of the planning application. And it seems that in 1919 there were 43 acres acquired, and this was in addition to the Balderston Road site. We understand that Falkirk Council gave or accepted permission for an agricultural building earlier in, I think it was 2021. The land at Lathallen, we note, is grade 2, which is land capable of producing a wide range of agricultural crops and is some of the better land in Scotland. The two fields at Lathallen are 43 hectares, and we are informed, along with the Balderston Road site, had a flock of 35 cattle and 350 sheep. But we are asked throughout the various bits of evidence to follow a stepping stones of evidence from there being 350 head of sheep to being 350 ewes, and then for the working out of the labour requirement, we are then invited that is a breeding flock of 350 ewes, but there is no evidence provided. No other evidence provided as to lamb sales and as to what is kept there and what the business is kept and what rams they have, etc. We did consider the information provided, and there is no information provided on the keeping of breeding ewes or indeed of cattle. No evidence of a business plan, no movement book, no ministry records, no information from the June agricultural census. And we did consider that it was an unlikely level of stocking for the 43 acres, noting that there is an additional 7 acres of land at Balderston Road, which has a lot of housing. We did note that in one of Mr. Pearson's replies that he stated that notwithstanding a dwelling house at Balderston Road is still off farm and there would be no natural supervision. So I think there is some confusion as to whether it is 1 unit or it is 2 units. but we're quite happy that there is business kept on both. There is agricultural business going on both units, and it is not uncommon for agricultural units to be spread apart, whether it is owned land or rented land, and they can be several miles apart. And even on a big farm, you may have land being managed many kilometres apart, particularly for overwintering of livestock. So they don't all have to be within a ring fence, and it is quite beneficial, I suppose, to be able to have a farm that is within a ring fence in one unit. But we felt that there was not enough information provided to demonstrate the agricultural business that was being undertaken, in particular with the obvious clear livestock movements associated with the haulage business, and being quoted the large number of available livestock places, with 3,500 pig places, 500 cattle places, and 1,000 odd sheep places in the housing within at Balderston Road. So how many of these are allocated to the agricultural business and how many to the haulage business? We have heard this afternoon about cattle being wintered. So are they part of the agricultural business or are they part of the haulage business? We don't know. That's not been demonstrated. Animal welfare is an important element for all farms, and all farmers and farm units have to take account of the animal welfare units, which ensures proper feeding and proper care for livestock, adequate shelter, a lot of animals are housed outside, particularly up in the hill areas. They're housed outside all winter, particularly sheep, so there's no definite requirement to house livestock so long as there are suitable conditions provided. Equally, as long as they are checked on a regular basis, which I think most people would consider once a day was on a regular enough basis. But this is obviously you'd want to do it on a more regular basis at critical times such as lambing and calving. And this is why a lot of livestock are housed over lambing and calving periods, and one would assume that there was adequate housing at Balderston Road to house during critical periods, or any sick animals would have equal facilities to be housed and could be supervised. It would seem that the animal welfare regulations are fully complied with the supervision provided at present, whether it is from staff operating out of Balderston Road, which we've heard this afternoon from 6 in the morning till 10 at night, which in fairness would be more than a lot of farmers would be supervising their livestock. So that would seem to more than adequately cover animal welfare requirements. And I think we've also heard that the next topic of the conversation was going to be, of discussion, was going to be the viability and the impact on viability. And that I think we've heard this afternoon that there would be no impact on the viability of the unit with or without a house. Our general impression is that the heart of the business, both financially, buildings and livestock numbers, would be at Balderston Road, not at the fields at Lathallen. I don't know how much time I've got.
A few minutes.
Right, okay. Right. Just to summarise, considering the nature of the business, if it is a combined business, it is difficult to determine from the information that we provide and the very particular functional need for the location of a property in the open countryside rather than at Balderston Road or in a local existing settlement due to insufficient information. Proposals arising from personal preferences or circumstances or convenience rather than essential need do not qualify within the policy. I think that's all I've got to say.
Okay, thank you very much. It's now time for opening up for questions, and I'm going to come in and one or two for myself just to start you off, sir. Thank you very much for your summary. In relation to what the agent had been saying, was that I think he was a wee bit considering the fact that yourself or anybody for your organisation or department had never visited. Is this a normal practice that you don't go and speak to people on site and then look for yourself?
We wouldn't normally go on site, no. You
don't go on site? So you're just taking the information gathered from...
We take the information provided in the planning application and yes.
And summarise and then make a decision to that or make a comment on that. I'm looking at your overall conclusion here. And one of the areas is that in terms of your conclusion, there's a number of areas that you believe that you still never had enough information coming back for the applicant. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Yes, right. One of the big issues for new housing in the countryside in terms of agricultural support is labour requirement. So in terms, again, the submission from the applicant's agent, it says, in order to meet the statutory requirement, it's generally accepted that person staff need to live on farm. That is provided there is a sufficiency of animals. The two fields at Lathallen support a flock of sheep and herd of cattle. The calculated labour requirement is 1.43 persons. So what do you take into that?
We think it is unlikely that you would maintain that level of stocking of 35 suckler cows and 350 breeding ewes on the 43 acres.
Right, but obviously he's got the figure of 1.43 for somewhere. So what calculation would you have done?
I would have used the same rate per breeding ewe or per cow, but I wouldn't have started with that figure.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to open it up to members now. Councillor Kelly.
Thanks. Can you tell me, is that, I mean, not being in animal husbandry myself, is that area big enough for 350 ewes and lambs in the season?
I don't consider that you would maintain a flock of that size or with cattle and sheep on 43 acres.
Do you know what the acreage would be per animal?
Well, it's going to vary on for sheep. It will vary on the different type of sheep you will keep and the different type of land that you have, but in general I would say between 3 and 3.5 ewes per acre.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Sorry, can I just come back to another thing. Regarding the workers in animal husbandry on the two areas, how many people would normally be looking after that amount of animals?
On how many animals? On the 350?
350 plus the 35.
Plus the cattle.
But you also have the cattle that are...
Well, it's difficult to know because there's obviously all the lairage cattle up at Balderston Road site. So you would be, probably on most farms, you would be you would be reaching the minimum to support one full-time worker. You would be unlikely to be able to support one full-time worker with that number of cattle, the cattle and sheep. And obviously, I think there's obviously a support and division of labour among the haulage and transport and lairage business, but we don't know how that works or how that is supported.
I was just trying to work out how many people would be needed on the Balderson site and how many on the Lathallen site. You know, they're trying to be.
I mean, on the Lathallen site, you couldn't. You would be unlikely to be able to support one full-time worker.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Excuse me. Yeah, excuse me. Everybody gave you an opportunity to speak without interference. If we hear any, well, whoever it was, whoever speaks again like that and interrupts this meeting, they'll be asked to leave. You understand? Thank you. Okay, then, getting back to the committee. Councillor Forrest, do you have any questions at this stage?
Yeah, sorry, it was more about the information that you said you were not supplied. Stocking sheets, etc. I think you mentioned. Is this a normal thing that you would get?
Most farmers would have significant records of breeding, numbers of lambs, numbers of calves produced, livestock sales, livestock purchases. At different times of the year, they would do headage counts for various purposes, whether it's for government census or for accounting purposes, so annual stock taking, and we don't have any information provided on that. We did, in the original submission, we did say that there perhaps could have been a business plan or something, as it's not as it would be a new enterprise, but I think we accept that it's perhaps is an ongoing enterprise, but one that is expanding in a different direction with more land. But we are still not provided with very much information and adequate information to make a reasonable decision.
Okay, thank you for that. The agent said that you hadn't actually visited the site and you've agreed that that's not normal practice. Did you request the further information from Mr. Stewart or his agent, you know, the things that you were not supplied, the stocking sheet, etc.?
We operated through the council and we did make our recommendations through to the council. We did get an additional sheet of information back provided by the council, but it didn't have any significant further information on it.
That's what concerned me slightly, because it was refused last time and we actually asked for further information, and if you've requested certain information and haven't received it, then you know it makes life difficult for us trying to make a decision. But if you have asked for it and it hasn't been given, then thank you for that. Thank you, convener.
Councillor Forrest. Councillor Flannery, any input?
Yes, convener. Just a few things actually. Bearing in mind across Scotland, you know, just an observation and what I've seen in television and know is there's quite a range of farms and farm sizes. And of course, if you go up to the Highlands, you can have many, many acres where animals are left to roam, you know, for the summer and winter or whatever. So therefore, the need to be there to observe them is not the same. But looking at lowland farms, I wonder if you can let me know, on average, how close you would expect the farmer or a relevant member of staff be to the fields that with the animals that he's looking for. I know in my own area I can tell you that, but I just wonder in general, excluding any Highland areas because they're obviously the extreme.
Gosh, it's really how long. It's really they would have to have facilities to check animals on a daily basis. So
Right,
how
close
far
would
does
that
that
be?
need to be? You know, if you're given a vehicle, you could be within, you know, a half-hour drive or something, as long as you've got somebody who is reasonably able to check livestock on a daily basis. Ideally, that is shorter, but you will get many farms that are spread out with different land holdings, numbers of miles apart, even in the lowlands. But in the highlands, actually, you know, the restriction on travel is crossing moorland and hill tracks, etc., and probably weather and snow, etc., in the winter. But in the lowlands, your distances are probably going to be less, but it's still the ability to travel and check on a regular basis and to be able to be called out if and when necessary. But it is the closer the better. But if you wanted a house, if you wanted an agricultural worker on every plot of land, you'd have an awful lot more houses.
Okay, no, I understand the closer the better. That makes a lot of sense. My next point really is that you referred to the lack of information, you know, buying, selling, breeding. But from my observation of the business today, I would guess that 90-odd% of it is really taking cattle in from other people or whatever, and pigs, fattening them up and then sending them off to market or to wherever. So kind of, from what you've said, it would tend to suggest that the sheep and the belted Galloway cattle are a relatively new venture. And certainly Mrs. Stewart said that this morning about the belted Galloway cattle, that these were cattle that she really liked and appreciated, and I think she'd bought them in the last year or so. So from that, I wouldn't particularly expect a lot of historical data. Would that be fair to say? Because you know, it's a relatively new.
Unfortunately, we
venture.
don't know what is, or we have not been told what is going on. And if she's bought belted Galloway cattle in the last year, we don't know about it. We haven't been provided with that information to make that assessment.
Okay, and
but you know, she may well have done, and it may well be a new business venture or a new venture. I can't comment on the commercial aspect of that.
No, understand that. We visited the site, the Balderston Road site this morning, and we were shown round, and it was very informative. On reflection, from what you've heard or know so far, do you feel perhaps it was an oversight, not due to because of the size of this business, not to actually visit and get a better insight? And then you would have possibly have heard some of the information that we, the councillors and officers, heard this morning.
We were assessing the information that we were provided with by the council.
Right.
So I can't comment further on that.
Okay, but did that information show the size of the overall business? You know, the hundreds of cattle and pigs and sheep that were there? No? Yeah.
It showed that there was a moderate-sized agricultural business, but not how those figures were arrived at.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, convener.
So we don't know what was going on within the sheds and the cattle being kept for the overwintering, which we heard about this afternoon. Are they part of the agricultural business, or are they part of the haulage business? We don't know, because we haven't been given those details.
Right, okay. I just find it strange that you should relate the two, the haulage and agricultural, because clearly cattle are agricultural and haulage is haulage, whatever you're hauling, you know, whether it's sheep, cattle or materials, you know. But anyway, it's just my observation. Thank you very much for that information, and thank you, convener.
Thank you for your input. Obviously, your terminology there struck me a bit when you said about the moderate size. That's one of the biggest biggest businesses that I've in rural settings that I've ever visited.
Sorry, the agricultural bit.
Yeah. Okay. Getting back to your overall conclusion, it says that the applicant has grouped the use of Balderson Road site and Lathallen site together under agricultural business use. As outlined above, the use of Balderstone Road site as a haulage yard is an entirely separate use from the use of the agricultural use of the Lathallen site. As such, they should be considered as separate planning units for the purpose of this application. So what you're saying there, do you believe then that they should have put an application in on its own merits for the Lathallen site? Is that what you're trying to say? And no joined them together with the that major site at Balderstone Road?
I think that's straying into planning questions and not agricultural questions.
You put it down in black and white in your conclusion. I'm only asking a question of what you've actually stipulated in your conclusion.
Okay, I still think that's a planning question. I think there is quite a lot of confusion as to whether it is two sites or one site. I'm quite happy to accept that both have agricultural operations. I'm sorry, what was the question? The question you want to know whether they should have done?
Whether you believe, and what you're saying here is that the entire, as outlined above, the use of Balderstone Road site as a haulage yard is an entirely separate use from the use of the agricultural use of the Lathallen site. As such, they should be considered as separate planning units for the purpose of this application. These are your words. So what you're saying in theory then, that you believe that the Lathallen site should have come in as a separate application and Balderson shouldn't have been involved in any way?
I can't comment on that because that's not an agricultural matter.
Well, it's related to us because of the fact is that you put it in your overall conclusion statement. But if that's your stance on it, thank you very much for coming today. And if you want to retake your seat, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
We're going to have a 10-minute comfort break and then we'll allow the agent to come back in and sum up. Okay, sir? You'll be able to come back in. Well, that is the procedure. Are you happy with that, Douglas? Yes. Okay, thank you, everybody. We'll reconvene the meeting. It's an opportunity now. We'll ask for the agent if he would like to come forward and just no introduce any new information, but just maybe to respond to either the information coming from the council's rural officer and also coming from members in relation to the areas that's been defined. Thank you, sir. You've got 5 minutes for this. Thank you.
Right, okay. Right, so there's a number of things that have been raised. I'll try to cover them all. So the comments about animal welfare. Seriously, it's never going to be acceptable just to inspect farm animals once a day. And the very reason for that is they need fed twice a day for a start. So this notion that you can run a farm remotely and travel half an hour is just not done. And my client would be risking prosecution if they left the animals for 23 hours a day and didn't bother to look at them. And this is what this is all about. It's all about the welfare of the animals. If there wasn't these requirements, no one would be living on any farms anywhere. They just wouldn't need to be there. Farmers could just live in big houses in urban areas. They don't have to be beside the animals. So there was also a bit of confusion, I think, about the animals that are currently in the fields. So a farm business is a rotating business. Sheep only have a typical life of a year before they go to slaughter. Maybe cattle, 2.5 years. The numbers are always going to move up and down. The registrations always have to be kept on top of. An animal goes to an abattoir in Yorkshire, and that's it. Its number's cancelled. You buy another one. It's a rotation of the animals themselves, and the numbers go up and down. So what you see in one field one day isn't always fixed. And similarly with climatic conditions, it goes up and down. So you didn't see 35 cattle in the fields this morning because a lot of them are in wintering sheds. But if we'd had this inspection in July, you would have seen the fields full of them. That doesn't mean they don't exist. The labour requirement figure, that of the 1.4 based on the herd and the flock numbers, which I've just explained, go up and down. That was given at the start of this process. So it's like at one point in time, when we make the application, that is what we've got. And that is our labour requirement. And it's based on the recognised method of calculation. Yet the planning authority's advisors haven't done a labour requirement because they haven't been out to talk to anybody or look at the fields. I'm not talking about Balderstone, I'm talking about these fields. They haven't produced any labour requirement figures, which I find quite staggering. And then we've got comments about stocking based on the amount of land. Well, there are no guidelines about how many animals should be in a particular size of field, and that's because of the topography of this country. Some These fields are relatively flat. You get farms on the side of a hill, and that dictates the density of the stocking. There are no minimum and no maximum stocking. Those fields are perfectly capable of dealing with that size of animals. Though I've only got 30 seconds. Those animals are already being inspected by rural payments. And if there was a stocking problem, lack of space, then rural payments would have said to Alan, you need to stop this, you need to get the figures, you need to move the animals. And just one more comment, 20 seconds. So you've seen the magnitude of the operations at Balderston. That is a massive farming process. It is not some toy or fanciful farm that's going on.
Okay, sir. You take your seat. Thank you very much. Okay, thanks everybody for it's been a very, very interesting day, starting off with the site visit, both to Balderstone and then up to Lathallen. Now, I've been scrutinising the paperwork for this for some time, and there's quite a lot of it. I sort of relate to reading the Magna Carta when I was going through some of the paperwork here. But in terms of you always got to look at the policies in relation to any decision making. Now, policy 8 about the green bit, residential accommodation required and designed for a key worker in a primary industry within the immediate vicinity of their place of employment, where the presence of a worker is essential to the operation of the enterprise, or retired workers where there is no suitable alternative accommodation available. So I would say that policy would be supportive in its own. The issue about rural homes in terms of policy principles, in terms of the LDP, in terms of which we're no discussing about the development plan, but it's just demonstrated to be necessary to support the sustainable management of a viable rural business or croft, and there is an essential need for a worker, including those taking majority control of a farm business, to live permanently at or near their place of work. Now, in terms of these policies which seem to be supportive, this has been a very difficult one. And the issue about sort of co-joining Balderstone road site and Lathallen together may have sounded maybe a good idea initially. But the fact of the matter is that it's made it quite complicated. It would have been a lot simpler if we were only going to see a new house in the countryside at Lathallen in relation to agricultural support. But to be honest with you, I don't think at this particular stage, because of the fact that we had a rural consultant, Patrick Thompson, come in, and Patrick Thompson did very well in summarising the fact that there was a lot of information that still needed to be required, and I'm feeling exactly the same. I feel that before we can take a decision, because I'm quite sympathetic to this, but obviously there is a lot of information that's still to be required, and I'll go forward in his overall conclusion in the technical memorandum. The applicant has grouped the use of Balderstone Road site and Lathallen site together under agricultural business use as outlined above. The use of the Balderstone Road site haulage yard is an entirely separate use from the use of the agricultural use of the Lathallen site. As such, they should be considered as separate planning units for the purpose of this application. From the information provided by the applicant, it is not considered that there is adequate justification for an additional dwelling at the Lathallen site. The viability of the Lathallen operation is not clear from the company accounts submitted, given there is no breakdown of individual business operations amongst the three company entities. There are also concerns in relation to the need for a full-time employee on a standard 46 acres. To overcome this, the applicant has quoted a higher level of stocking than expected and included the accounts with a significant transport business. Due, and this is in the conclusion, due to the inadequate information provided in stocking for the last 3 years, a relevant business plan for the agricultural unit and accounts for the agricultural business, we do not consider as justification for a new dwelling on the Lathallen site. So what they're saying in reality is that they would not be supportive because of the fact that they haven't got enough information to take a decision. And I feel exactly the same. And as such, I'll maybe go to our planning officer, Julie Seidel. Julie, obviously there is a number of areas that the information has still not been transferred from the applicant to officers. Would it be possible to including in this summary from the technical memorandum for advisor that we can include any information that we put forward? I'm going to formally move that this application has got to come back again because of the fact is that I believe that we haven't got enough information, as has been stated quite clearly by a rural advisor. There are certain areas in here that's been mentioned, but any other information that's still required, can we include that in any decision taken?
Yes, I think if members of this committee have questions, and it has been raised that there is information that our consultants felt was lacking, then we could continue the application to allow that information to come in. For clarification, on page 25 of your papers, you can see some dialogue between the agent and the original planning officer, where it's communicated the response from our consultants. So I think there was an opportunity for additional information to come in, but I feel at this stage it's entirely reasonable if the committee wish to do that. I don't know if we want to be very specific on what information we would be looking to come back. I know that when our consultant spoke, he mentioned stocking records,
yep,
census information, sales data.
Yep.
So I don't know whether we want to keep it very specific or we can do a more general request for information as you've set out. That might be something our legal advisor could give some clarity
Mr.
on.
Blythe.
Thanks, convener. Yes, it's excuse me. It's probably quite difficult to be prescriptive at this stage. I think there is reference to additional information, and I presume that would be by way of written submissions. Yeah. Dealing with stocking levels for the Lathallen site, census information, sales data, and I think there was also reference to the separation of the account information, yeah, for the Lathallen site. And that could be the subject of further procedure note, seeking that additional information or that breakdown of information from the applicant, and that could come back to the committee at a future point.
Right, I'm happy to move that. Have I got a seconder?
Happy to second.
How do you feel, Councillor Forrest?
I'm content with that. Could I add one thing?
Yep.
Just for the record, there is no way that I would ever have cast doubts on the welfare and the good practice and husbandry of any of the animals that we saw today. I think it was exemplary what we actually saw, and the applicant's son, who runs the pig side of the business, he's an absolute credit. He's very enthusiastic and very, very good.
Very good. Yeah, I think we'd agree with that. Councillor Friend, I'm coming to you. You've heard there's been a motion moved and seconded to continue for more information before a final decision is taken. How do you feel about that motion?
Yep. Yes, thank you, convener. I would echo Councillor Forrest's comments, and I would echo the fact that I could see why the family want to move closer to the animals because of the level of care, which is, in my opinion, exemplary. In terms of the motion, I'm happy to support it. I think with a bit more clarity in some of the detail that would actually help paint a clearer picture at our next meeting on this. Thank you.
Fine, thank you. Well, that. Just to clarify, go back to Mr. Blythe. We've been nearly 2 hours at this. It's been a really good debate. As Councillor Forrest says, it was tremendous to go out there this morning and see that set up. It was absolutely superb. And other than that, I would like to go back to Mr. Blythe just to tell us where we are at this particular stage, sir.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, convener. Yes, I think the committee is determined to invite further written submissions on the items that were outlined as regards stocking levels, census data, sales data, and account information. Officers will detail that in a further procedure notice, and that will be submitted to the applicant. It would be normal for that to be then shared with the planning authority for comments, and there will be a process of exchange of information before that comes back before members.
Okay then, members agreed?
Yep.
All agreed. Okay, thank you. That brings us to the end of today's meeting. I'd like to thank all members and officers, both here and online, and to thank the applicant's agent and our representative for coming along. Thank you very much.